I am Shagufta Mulla, and I'm gonna wait a few minutes to let people hop on. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I am a poet, obviously, and I practiced veterinary medicine for 20 years, cats and dogs, some exotics like pocket pets and such. And I'm currently the art editor of Peatsmoke Journal as well. And, oops, things are popping up on my screen. All right. I can't see if people are hopping on. Okay, looks like we have some viewers, so that's good. Okay, I'll wait again a few more minutes for people to hop on, but I'm also an artist and I work in oil. I do pet portrait commissions. I also paint animals in acrylic, and I've been an artist since I was a kid, and I also do some things on paper like India ink and that sort of thing. And I started creative writing by doing like flash memoir back in maybe 2019, and I noticed my pieces were like micro flash, and I thought, well, not that all poetry is short, but maybe I'll try writing poetry. And so I started writing poetry in 2020, and have just kind of evolved, things have evolved since then. And a lot of my poetry is about processing pain and like from childhood and other things in life. But so I'll take questions towards the end and I'll read for about 15 minutes, but I'll also talk a little bit after I get done reading about my process and things that inspire me to write poetry and that sort of thing. I don't have any chapbooks or poetry books that have been published, but I do have them unpublished. So moving towards, you know, getting some work out there. And of course, I have some work published in literary journals as well. So I think I will go ahead and get started with my reading. And so these first few poems are about pain in and after childhood. And the first piece is called Quiet Corners. It's my birthday, and silence disappears when I come downstairs. My mother, in this moment, she seems free with me, so my smile rides high like hers as she uncovers a cottontail trapped behind couch cushions in the dining room corner. Blinking black lashes, animal and child, up and down ears try to protect a neck of silk. The bubbling body squirms in my mom's hands like my summer set me free energy in Pennsylvania's sun. The rabbit tells me stories of what it is to be beyond voices in enclosed corners, beyond fences the neighbors never see. No, you can't keep her for comfort or company. So we release this dart and dash out the back door, and she settles under my backyard swing while I try to settle my breath into silence before my mother and I return to our own quiet corners. This second poem I just wrote a few days ago because life has been painful again somehow. It keeps happening. And so this is just called Life. I swim in sand, but the ocean never comes. Scoop, sweep, scoop, sweep up to my neck, now held by a gull's school bus yellow beak. In the 360 breeze, sand rains from my feet, falls from the old grooves and new bruise in my ever soft shell. On the cliff, I see the ocean upside down, Feel both beak and summer breeze burrow inside me. Scoop, sweep, scoop, sweep, spills my streams onto basalt that holds parts of me I could never reach. I look up into sunny blue and do backstrokes that ease me out of beak and shell, backstrokes that ease me into clarity, backstrokes that slip me out of a coagulating sea. This next poem is a vignette, and it's the longest poem I've written, so close to 2 pages. And it's called Spilling My Entirety. 1. On my 2-lane drive to I-5, I pass a pair of black mittens and an unbuttoned coat, close enough for me to gather up before I might get run over, but the fresh red lining of the mittens has already spilled into now still halos, illumined by drips of early morning sun. The coat's pearl buttons are cracked by middle-of-the-night headlights, her pockets permanently picked of warmth and mittens, her heart's lub-dub hurry, lingers in my energy alongside coatless lung lobes scattered on the road like a lavender pink sunrise that fell from the sky. 2. Today my extended siblings will be the muse for me, which is to say I may write about their midnight without headlight forms, what my beauty used to be before fear unzipped me pre-puberty, the man's unconscious hand across my face, just a few times, he tells me, which pushed me aside inside my coat, forced me to shed my entirety. If I didn't see my beauty, I'd be quiet, and then maybe the man wouldn't see me. But the problem is, then no one did, because an almost empty coat is like a ghost on dark country roads. 3. There are so many crumpled coats, and I see myself in the yellow lane where 3 once black cats lie. In a mile, I find more of my extended siblings in the ditch, next to knotted napkins and an almost empty Pepsi cup, settling for gray rain. But then I see the red-winged blackbird in a drive-by tree, and his proud sleeve reminds me that torn-out linings aren't the death of me, but the death of undealt with generational fear. So I decide what color and fabric I want in and around me, loosely button myself up in fragrant rows of roses, a coat turned inside out so others may enter my field from roads that unbuttoned them, might see themselves reflected and be free. And maybe as their soft, unmittened hands settle on my pink layered face, I will find a new way to unbutton my beauty, a reclaimed way to spill my entirety into sunlight, my extended siblings reflecting sunrise back to me. A home despite fences. Rabbits have always been a home for me. You may say, how can rabbits be a home? Anyone will tell you that backyard fences can't keep out rabbits. So after a series of wooden slats erupted around an acre's rise and plunge of Pennsylvania green, cottontails still gathered under my childhood swing. But not just anywhere under there. They huddled like love on the runway of sneaker-scraped dirt under my swing, the one on the right, while I sang beneath a nearby lilac tree. Their furred feet rested in the evening where, on any given afternoon, I rose with waving cotton skirts into embracing blue, or bundled in gray, blended with the same, my pendulum suspending me above stiff family fences, beyond which the pines skipped with the sky for miles. Sometimes I stood at the back door, cold clank and whir of the kitchen behind me, and I watched the rabbits choose to be there, face to face, their whiskers and whispers, my world of dandelion wishes, and we, the rabbits and I, enjoyed a shared space despite fences. Okay, now we're moving on to hope and healing. These are, this poem is about some Gerbera daisies, I think that's how you pronounce them, that I bought at Trader Joe's. And it's called Of Daisies and Hope. Sometime during the night, the sunny daisies dropped their gold dust on my desk, scattered their constellations for only me to see. And you might say, it's just pollen, but who among us hasn't sent out hope from our containers where we sat, clipped and quiet? Containers where our starry eyes awakened in the night, and because of how dark and still it felt, we sang our gold dust and made ourselves a breeze. This next poem, when I wrote it, I referred to the western bumblebees by their genus and species because at the time I thought I was going to write a bunch of science-based poems, but that didn't last. But I kept the genus and species in this poem. So if you're wondering what this is, it's the western bumblebee. Of bees and gardens. Several Bombus occidentalis bounce between silky coral petals, convexity complementing concavity, and I wait my turn like a thirsty kid at recess, bubbling with friends before the fountain. Upon blurred yellow and black departure, I step forward for refreshment, dip the curve of my face into electric essence, eyes soft as the fragrant field folds around my aura, silently soothing my buzzing background conundrums. I dip in and out of rows of nature's holy hands, safe even with their arsenal of stingers, the exultant energy filling concavities I didn't know I had. That's when I thought I was actually healed and I really wasn't. Okay, this one I actually just wrote a few weeks ago. I ask morning to make me a song, a warbler to warm the worn blanket of tongue and crack the ceiling of hard palate, a song that doesn't migrate in winters when sheets of summer elegy entwine around my face, a song too big to trip past my laugh, too big to tumble into a cave before sinking into my stomach, the way a peach pit once did. A song that's so in season year-round that green tendrils are always wrapped around my fingers like the light hold of trusting bird feet. A song that makes me close my eyes to reach inside beyond the squall and pull the parachute cord to unfurl my hidden flight feathers, unfurl every season inside of my own morning sun, unfurl a wingspan of rising notes from my mouth. This next poem is one of my earliest poems, so I'm actually surprised I still like it. And it's a conversation with my inner child. And that's not why I say I'm surprised I still like it. It's just because a lot of my earlier poems, well, you know what those are like. So, in general. And it's called We Are Geese Now. They're geese, Canada or cackling, I'm unsure. But see the long necks? How many, she asks. 2, 4, 5, 6, and my inner 8-year-old doesn't hate math when it's on her terms. I want to fly with them. So I think for a second, then give her a boost. Lean in, and she does, wings sprouting in seconds of overnight footage. There's 7 now, she squeaks, as she circles above, and the now spills me into the breeze, pulls me forward, and I lean in to make it 8. Okay, this next one I wrote when I was starting to try to meditate. And it's called A Meditation of Geese. My hemmed fabric unravels in wonder when evening geese are coming. The murmur of thunder born out of silence cranes my mind's eye. The drifting playground of aerial squawk and squall claps like enraptured cumulonimbus against sundown's settling blaze, rebirths me as crisp, uncreased cotton yet to be clipped and repurposed. then softens like gathered geese, stitching silver ponds with white ruffles and yawns, hushed by dusk's curled up embers. This next poem is called A Majesty of Owls. And I wrote this after I saw someone's nest box cam video. I think a family of owls, be they barn or screech, great horned or elf, or any other, should be called a majesty. On the nest box cam, I gaze at two clouds with their heart-shaped stare at the third's sleepy float and sway, bellies full of the bolt of burrowing cotton or the hush and dash of moon-watched wheat, and I wait for their majestic mist to rise, their crowns to billow forth, whose new bronze robes will suddenly fill with the nimble feet of night. Okay, last poem. This is another vignette. And I've started to incorporate a lot of birds into my poems, but something that's interesting to note, well, at least to me, is that I find feathers in the woods this time of year, and there have been times where I have found 30 feathers in the woods in like an hour. So I incorporated that into this poem. And it's called Birds Teach Me About Divinity. 1. Pintail ducks slide by on summer sun, golden gleam spilled across the Willamette, the silent ease and anchor that submerges my thoughts of fledged bald eagles nearby. 2. The 3 woodpecker feathers I found in the forest, black and white, alive, then maybe an owl, fill the length of my hand. Pileated? I saw one once when I stopped to find the thud, 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 wholeness scooping out a hole, filling it with new intentions. 3. Where I have been carved, sometimes with carnivorous beaks, sometimes with slow spoons, I let divinity nest again. I preen this gleam through the length of me, then glide, like rivers or pintails, filled with the weightlessness of home. Okay, I can take questions, but I'm also gonna tell you a little bit about my process and how my work is evolving. And oh wow, there's 9 comments. Let's see. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything before I move on. Okay. What books have you been reading lately? Any recommendations? I have a whole stack of poetry, like chapbooks, and I'm trying to think of who specifically I'm reading. I'm reading Ada Limon, and I'm trying to think. I'm also reading actually fiction too, which sometimes inspires poetry for me. I'm reading, let me see, The Maker of Swans currently. I don't know if you can see this. But a lot of times I actually just read poetry journals. And usually the journals that I read poetry in are like Comstock Review, Poetry Northwest, Rattle, Narrative, Southern Humanities Review. And so, another question. How has the pandemic and all its strictures changed the way you work, read, and make sense of your place in the writing community? Well, I started writing poetry during the pandemic, and it wasn't specifically because of the pandemic, but things were coming up at that time in my life that were painful. And so I feel like it wasn't a stricture for me per se because I tend to spend a lot of time alone and inside. And so, except for when I'm in the woods. And so it actually gave me more time. It made me feel more liberated to just spend more time working on my poetry and evolving. And so, let's see. I have some notes so I wouldn't forget to tell you stuff about myself. So I'm going to look at those. A little bit about my process. I often get poems in their entirety and then I edit from there. So it's actually rare for me to just get like a little bit of a poem that I have to keep coming back to finish. So, and interestingly, as I've processed a lot of my pain that had to do with childhood and as I've evolved, my poetry sometimes changes in real time, meaning my ability to write poetry will literally change within a week. And meaning that, like, as my consciousness went up, that week I would be able to write a poem in a way that I literally could not have written the week before. So I thought that was interesting and I'd be interested to know if other people have that experience. And some goals that I have moving forward in my poetry is that I'm trying to incorporate the element of like the spirit of animals as helpers on our healing path. And so that's why there are rabbits and birds in my poems, and interestingly, in my paintings as well. Rabbits and birds are what I've turned to a lot to paint. And let's see, and probably the two biggest things that have helped me grow as a poet is reading poetry, which if you've been writing poetry forever, you're going to say, well, of course. But the first few months that I was writing poetry, wasn't reading poetry. And then when I started reading poetry, amazing. Like my works literally changed suddenly. And then I told you about like working on my trauma and stuff. So I'm just going to look in the comment section to see if I'm missing any questions. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna wait a little bit just in case, but and if you are interested in checking out more of my art, I'm on Instagram at S.Mulla.DVM, which is in my bio, which should be in the notes for this video. And I don't usually post a whole lot of poetry there, although I'll post poetry news there, like if I was accepted somewhere. And then my next reading that I'm aware of, unless something happens before then, is I have a poem coming out in Santa Fe Literary Review, and I think the reading for that will be in October, and I'm sure I'll post about it on Instagram. So I don't have like a poetry Facebook page. I do have a private Facebook page, but my Instagram page is public, and so I don't see any other questions, and so thank you, Shannon, for putting some links in the chat. But thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thanks.